times have we wondered why the Ravens didn't grab a wide receiver for Lamar Jackson? Well, a lot. It seemed like free agency was a good time to try. It turns out Baltimore did try, but it just didn't work. T.Y. Hilton confirmed he turned down a multi-year offer from the Ravens this offseason. Here's more from T.Y.
I wanted to stay here no matter what the cost was, and I gave up a lot of money to stay here, and that's what I wanted to do.
So, Mina, also, JuJu Smith-Schuster went back to Pittsburgh despite an offer for more from Baltimore. What do you make of these moves? Why don't these guys want to play for the Ravens?
Well, Laura, there are some unusual circumstances. The offseason, of course, this year has been strange in terms of contracts, and some of these guys are just going back to the teams that they've played on before. But you can't deny the fact that the Baltimore Ravens have the lowest receiving yards of any team for wide receivers over the last 2 years in the NFL. Now, it would be unfair to pin all of that on Lamar Jackson, who, by the way, if you want to talk about T.Y. going back to the Colts and JuJu going to the Steelers, Lamar was more accurate last year than Carson Wentz, had a lower off-target percentage, and has a better deep arm than Ben Roethlisberger at this point. But the passing game in Baltimore has struggled. The concepts have been stale. It's a run-first offense. All of this factors into it, as well as the lack of receiving talent. For me, the question is, how do they get better? Yes, they signed Sammy Watkins, but that can't be it for Baltimore. Do we start looking towards the draft for this team to improve for their skill players? Because otherwise, I don't see a path.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mina. I mean, when you look at this is really like a vicious cycle. They need to get better at receiver, but their offense doesn't allow them to, so guys don't want to sign there. And it just continues it, so they go, well, we can't get receivers, we can't get better. It just becomes that cycle. But when I think about T.Y. Hilton in particular, I think this was really a comfort fit. And honestly, maybe for JuJu Smith-Schuster as well. When these guys understand what's expected of them, what the culture in their locker room is, what the offense is going to look like, I think that gives comfort to guys. And especially with, like you said, this weird kind of offseason. T.Y. Hilton, it's a one-year deal, right, with the Colts. These teams are going to be good football teams. They know Baltimore is. So what's the real upgrade for them? If they don't really know what they're getting into, they don't know that the offense is going to necessarily be built around them or feature them, these guys are just deciding to stay home. And again, they're going to need somebody like Watkins is going to have a big year, or somebody they draft has to have some big numbers to get guys interested to go in there with this offense. And that has nothing to do with Lamar Jackson, to your point, Mina.
It's worth noting that this is really an issue that I believe is most pertinent to the 2020 season, because if we're going to nitpick what happened in 2019 with this Ravens offense, it's also the same team that we were talking about as the runaway favorite for the Super Bowl going into the playoffs. But I do think it is interesting to see how this dynamic evolves for Lamar Jackson going forward, because while systematically it's a run-heavy scheme, and as Mina noted, some of the concepts, you just watch them, feel too familiar to be trotting out Sunday after Sunday after Sunday for defenses not to pick up. But we do need a wide receiver to sort of further emerge, to feel as though this offense is conducive to producing that kind of player. My question will be, is it going to be a classic Ravens maneuver where what they frequently do is they draft well and a guy may not emerge right away, but they've got players from their draft class last year, Devin Duvernay, very fast receiver out of Texas, James Prochet out of SMU, a sure-handed slot-type wide receiver. Are we going to see that? Because if not, part of what the Ravens deal with in free agency is that the roster is so well built and has so many good players that are already paid a lot that their resources aren't up to what other teams have who have greater roster deficiencies. So I don't know that I'm quite yet certain that I have a specific takeaway on why there hasn't been a top-tier wide receiver with Lamar Jackson. But I think there's something to keep an eye on here going forward, Laura. It's a really interesting dynamic in play in Baltimore.
Yeah, Phil, to your point, when it comes to the draft, and maybe if that's their path, Todd McShay's latest mock draft has the Ravens selecting Terrace Marshall Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU. And listen, maybe he's a guy that even almost instantly improves their offense and can be a guy that you could use in a deep threat situation, because he is that type of player. Mina, is that the answer? Did they draft the receiver?
I think they should. The Ravens have needed an edge rusher as well with some of the losses in free agency. But at this point, I just think you got to go receiver. I like Marshall. Field knows I love Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. He's kind of my draft crush right now. I just think He has it all, the route running ability, the strength, the release. And I think those are some components that have been missing in this offense. Yes, they do have Mark Andrews, who's basically their number one wide receiver. Hollywood, you've got that speed element, but they don't have a true number one wide receiver. And I think Bateman does have that potential.
That's right.
Yeah, and one thing about Bateman, some people are like, oh, well, he went to Minnesota, which, by the way, we shouldn't throw shade on Minnesota. He fell in love with P.J. Fleck and that row the boat mindset there. That's why he went to Minnesota, and I think it served him quite well. We'll find defensive tackle a 94 overall grade. He trails only Trevor Lawrence and Jamar Chase in their rankings. It's huge when it comes to what you might think he could do at the next level. And ESPN senior draft analyst Todd McShay released his mock draft 4.0 yesterday. Here's a look at his top projected 10 picks, which includes the Panthers trading up one spot for North Dakota State's Trey Lance. All right. With that mock draft yesterday, guys, let's run through some things that you loved or maybe didn't love in that mock. Jeff, you go first.
Yeah, Penei Sewell going past the Bengals. I just do not understand it. This guy, he's a plug and play. 10 years, going to be your starting left tackle. He's going to make you a better football team. If you look at numbers historically in the NFL, when you protect a quarterback, their QBR goes up from 30s and the 40s when they get pressure to 70s and when they do not. I don't care about all the shiny toys we all talk about. Receivers, tight ends, you have got to protect them. You watched Joe Burrow get carted off last year. You cannot have that same thing happen again. Sewell going to the Bengals is a must.
So I'm fascinated by the Eagles taking, hypothetically, Micah Parsons, a Penn State linebacker, number 12 overall. In some ways, perfect fit. This is a team that has had a huge hole at linebacker. Parsons can do it all. He can blitz, he can cover, he can tackle. However, going down from 6 to 12 as they did and missing out on one of those top-tier wide receivers will be a bitter pill for Eagles fans to swallow. And for that reason, it makes me a little nervous.
I got my eyes on pick number 18, which is where Todd had Caleb Farley, the cornerback from Virginia Tech, going to the Arizona Cardinals, whose cornerback depth chart is razor thin right now. The concern with Farley is he recently had a back procedure that's going to cost him about 4 months in terms of recovery time. But Laura, I love this player. He could be the best defensive prospect from this draft by the time it's all said and done. He is so smooth. He would fit perfectly in Arizona at pick 18.
Yeah, under Bud Foster's tutelage, she's had great training. We're just getting started. There's a quarterback the Patriots are projected to get in McShay's latest mock that have some here thinking the football gods could be conspiring against everyone who isn't a New England fan. We'll